What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Canadian Football Fantasy Fix for Week 8 of the 2021 CFL season. I'm Ryan Coop here with your wide receiver preview for this week. Bit of a weird week this week. First game kicks off on Wednesday, so make sure you get those lineups in. And only 3 games on the schedule, 6 teams to pick from, with 2 games coming on Friday night as well. So the wide receiver preview is coming out a little earlier in the week because the first game is a little earlier, of course. Quick note, I'm recording this late Monday night, and I know it's coming up Tuesday later in the day, so we may have depth charts for Hamilton and Ottawa already. That may impact some of the things I say here, but I will have another update out on Wednesday to go through those depth charts and mention anything, maybe adjust accordingly based on those. But let's take a look at some of these options as they are now for each team. And let's start off with the Hamilton Tiger Cats and the Ottawa Red Blacks, which goes Wednesday. Here are your options, starting with Hamilton for receiver this week. No Brandon Banks on here. He has officially been ruled out already at this point for another game. So here's what we're looking at. The 2 guys at the top of the list here, Braylon Addison, DeVere Posey, neither has played a game yet this year. They've both been on the 6-game injured list and have not been ready to go yet. They are eligible to come off. And I know Braylon Addison tweeted something this week about him being close to being ready to go. So we'll have to monitor that when the depth chart comes out. But let's assume he does play. I don't like the price point at $10,977. You've got David Watford starting at quarterback again, an inexperienced quarterback. He had an okay game last week, but didn't light it up in the passing game. Yes, that's a good matchup with Ottawa, who gives up a lot of passes, a lot in the passing game. But I think getting 27.4 points, which would lead you to, getting full value out of him, 2.5 points per $1,000, which would help get a 100-point week, certainly. I don't think you're getting that from Braylon Addison in his first game back. Give me a couple games to see what he's like after 2 years, 2 years since he last played, plus, sitting out 6-7 weeks so far. And same thing for DeVere Posey. The price point's a little lower, so he's a little bit more tempting, but $75.41. You need 18.9 points out of him. Again, I want to see how he factors into this Hamilton offense before I'm committing that kind of salary to a guy like DeVere Posey. Going down the list, Jalen Acklin, I put him in the yellow light category. Honestly, after the last couple of weeks, I really wanted to put him as a red light option, as in stay away from him. In his last, he had that big 22.8 point performance against the Bombers in week 1, but since then, 8.1, 2.3, a decent 12.6, a 9.8, and a 2.4 last week against Calgary. So I thought maybe we'd see David Watford lean on him as the more veteran presence of that receiving corps, but he just didn't last week. And the only reason I bumped him up to yellow light is because it is the matchup with Ottawa, and I think there's some potential for passing yards to be had here for the Ticats. And I still think we are going to see a game where Jalen Acklin is their leading receiver, but I can't green light him this week because he's given us too many disappointments in a row. The 2 I do put in the green light category, Tim White and Poppy White. Tim White's salary is starting to rise quite a bit, and I think it's justified. He is no longer the $2,500 option because in 5 games this year, he's averaged 11.8 points. That's 4 weeks in a row where he, 4 of his 5 games, he's put you up over the 9.1 you need at his salary. So he's been fairly consistent. He did have the 1 game breaker against Toronto in week 5 with 21.9 points, but he's surrounded that with 9.8, 9.5, and 10.9. So it hasn't been, week in and week out 20-point performances, but at that low price point, you don't really need it. It'd be nice if you get it every single week, but as long as he's putting you up those 9 or 10 points, you're getting what you need from Tim White. Poppy White has 2 games in a row, giving you full value, 16.3 and 7.3 in his last 2 games. I do like him as an option as well. Again, should be room to pass for that Ticats offense, and he seems to be getting more involved. And also getting involved a little bit in the run game as well, which should pad some fantasy stats there a little bit. I'm staying away from David Unger this week, averaging 3.5 points through 6 games. He had 2 games in a row there against Toronto, where he hit full value, but last week against Calgary put up a big old goose egg. 0 points last week. I say stay away from David Unger. I don't think he's your game breaker necessarily a game breaker on any given week. And in the cautionary category, Stephen Dunbar Jr. from Hamilton. Also $2,500. He does have a higher average than Poppy White, so maybe he should go in the green light, but I think that's padded by the big 21.5 point performance in his debut. Since then, 3.3, 6.8, and 5.7 for Stephen Dunbar Jr. So a little more cautious on him just because he's had more of a downward slide in recent weeks since his debut. Looking at the Ottawa side of things, the Red Blacks coming in off the bye week. Here's who we have at wide receiver so far. They did bring in a number of guys over the bye week. One of the biggest ones being Kenny Stafford of the former Elk, I think he was with Montreal. He was with the Bombers ever so briefly. But it remains to be seen if he plays this week. Same thing with some of the other options. They brought in a couple guys from the NFL. They're currently not listed. I just double-checked while I'm speaking here in CFL Fantasy. So let's go with the guys we know and talk about them for now. And then we can cover the changes in the depth chart update on Wednesday. RJ Harris is the most expensive one. He comes in at $6,351. Flashback to 2019, he was their go-to guy outside of Brad Sinopoli. He's averaged 9 points through 5 games. A bit of a disappointment at his price point. Last game against BC put up 7.6. 2 weeks before that against BC, 2.6. But other than that, in games not against a good BC defense, 15.1 against Saskatchewan and 15.7 against Montreal in 2 of his last 4 games. So he's been close on a few of them. That's why I have him as a cautionary tale. I think, if it's an efficient day for Ottawa's offense, he should have a good point total for you. But he's had some disappointments there throughout the year. So I'm not so sold on going with RJ Harris this week. Devontae Dedmon missed last game due to injury for BC. The game before that put up 19.1 points, where he had a huge return game against Montreal. Got involved in the passing game, got involved in the rushing game. I want to green light him, but I'm putting him in the yellow light category. First of all, he's coming back from injury. Second of all, he put up 250 return yards against the Alouettes, which is ridiculous, and I don't see him putting that up again against Hamilton this week. And then third of all, they found some nice chemistry there with Dom Davis and Anthony Coombs last week, who's not on this chart because he is listed as a running back in CFL Fantasy, and I touched on him in the running back preview, but if they're going to have Anthony Coombs and want to keep him in the starting offense, then Dedmon perhaps doesn't get a spot as a starter at wide receiver, which means I don't think he puts up 11.9 points alone in the return game, which is why I'm hesitant there. I do really like Ryan Davis. It makes me sad, but also makes me very happy to see his value rise. $4,128 is his salary. It used to be $2,500. It is no more. 10.3 points is what you're looking for from him. And in 5 games, he's put up 13.4, including a big 26.9 point performance against BC right before the bye week. He gets involved a little bit in the return game, especially if Dedmon can't play. He gets involved a lot in the passing game as a go-to target there, and he sometimes gets some rushing plays as well. So I really like Ryan Davis, even at a higher price point, to cover his value for you this week. Daniel Peterman, I am cautious on. He did seem like he was starting to get more involved in that offense. Had 2 touchdowns 2 games ago and put up 26.7. Had nothing going in any games before that, and then fell back a little bit with 7.2 in his last game. So if he was a cheaper salary, I think I'd lean more into that pick necessarily, but I think there are some other good options, such as Ryan Davis, I would definitely go with over Daniel Peterman for around the same price. Nate Behar, I think, is a great value play, though. $3,362, so you save about $700-800 over some of those other guys. And he has hit his total in 3 straight weeks. Solid production, 11.6, 10.7, and 11.1 in his last 3 games. That part of that is obviously due to the bit of a resurgence for the offense with the new quarterback, Dom Davis. Well, I guess he's the old quarterback, the new starter, and it's no longer Matt Nichols, is what I mean. His price is still relatively low. 8.4 should be something one of the go-to receivers in your offense can hit. A couple catches, 4 catches, 44 yards. Boom, you got your total there. So 7.8, he's close on his average, and he's really picked up his game in the last few weeks. So I like Nate Behar. And then the one other option I say stay away from, Wesley Lewis. Likely won't get a starting spot. He may be listed as a backup. He hasn't really gotten involved in the offense at all this year, so stay away from him this week. Moving into the second game of the week, I believe we have Montreal and Toronto. Let's start with the Alouettes side of things. No option I really love here for Montreal. I have a lot of yellow lights on this team right now because, and I think I talk about the receivers as a bunch quite often for Montreal, and it's a factor of they're all kind of higher in price for the most part, and you never really know which one's going to have the good day, and in general, you don't know if Montreal's offense is going to have a good day. I mean, they tore Ottawa's defense to shreds a couple weeks ago, and then had a very inefficient day against BC last game. And BC does have one of the better defenses, to be fair, but disappointing days if you took the likes of Jake Weineke. Eugene Lewis had an okay day, but did not put up your full value there. BJ Cunningham, not a bad day for him last week, but I want to know which Montreal offense is going to show up. And they're facing Toronto, who may have some pieces missing on defense. Cam Judge, Enoch Muamba were both not participants in practice, or at least limited earlier today after leaving the game due to injury against the Riders on Friday. So maybe there's some holes there for the Alouettes. There's always the threat they're going to have a big day and pop off for the 30, 31 point performances they did a few weeks ago, but there's also the potential that they're going to be a big letdown at that price. Jake Weineke and Eugene Lewis, you need over 20 points from them, and you haven't gotten that consistently week in and week out from either of them. Really only that one big day. Otherwise, it's been a bit of a disappointment. BJ Cunningham does have the lower price, and you need 16 points from him. He did put up 13.6 last week. But that has been his highest total since week 2 against Edmonton, where he put 19.6. So he hasn't been putting up the monster totals either. So I'm cautious there. But he is definitely the best value play, I would say, out of these Alouettes receivers. Of those big 3, I think I like Eugene Lewis as the best option out of them. He was the most targeted one last week again. He seems to get more targets than the others. He gets those long passes his way that can really, help pad your fantasy stats. So I think I like Eugene Lewis the most. I do also like Weineke. He's always a red zone threat. He didn't pick up a touchdown last week, which hurt his value for sure. But I would I'd stay cautious on any of these options in a matchup against Toronto this week. I think I like Lewis the best out of them, then maybe Cunningham, then Weineke, but it's very close between all of those. Quan Bray missed the past couple games. I say stay away from him at 7,000. Even if he is back in the lineup, he gets far less targets in the games he played than those other guys. You'll notice no Mario Alford here. He is out for the next couple of weeks due to injury, so the Alouettes will have a couple of new guys returning kicks for them, which I believe they're defensive players that have been doing that, so no need to touch on the fantasy perspectives of those because you can't pick them as a returner. But a couple other pieces in Montreal's offense. Dante Absher's gotten a start the past couple of games in the absence of Quan Bray. Last week he put up 6.6 points and got a little more involved. And, $2,500, 6.6 would have been good enough for a good week for you out of him. But in the game before that against Ottawa, he got 0. So, up and down, hasn't really broken out, had a big day. So I say cautious on that, even as a value play, if you're thinking this Montreal offense is going to put it all together this week. It's probably your targets are going to go to Cunningham, Weineke, Lewis, etc. And then Keon Julian Grant has played in every game for Montreal so far this year, but just averaging 1.3 points per game. Has not factored in very much in any performance yet this season. So stay away from him as well. Moving into the Toronto side of things, much like Montreal, I have a lot of yellow lights just because they spread the ball around. It's really hard to pick which Argos receiver is going to lead the way. Heck, sometimes it's backup running back DJ Foster who leads the way as the leading receiver over all of these talented options. So you really don't know what you're going to get from the Argos week in and week out. They have some high-priced options here, which, Ricky Collins Jr., Eric Rogers, Tavares Daniels, I can kind of talk about them in a bunch, is they have their good days and they put up solid point totals. Ricky Collins, for example, last 2 games, 14 and 15.1. Eric Rogers in his last 3, 16, 9.6, 19.7. Tavares Daniels in his last 4, more notably, 24.8, that big one against the Bombers, 11.7 against Hamilton, then just 4.2, then 16.7. So it seems to be kind of up and down for a lot of the Argos receivers. The team in general is up and down on any week. One week they play well, one week they don't. If that trend continues, this should be the good week for them, which gives me a little more optimism on Toronto. I think there's also room for some receivers to have big days against Montreal. Ottawa had their best offensive performance of the year against Montreal. A couple weeks ago, BC had a big game against them last week. So some of these guys could put up the point totals for you. I think Ricky Collins Jr. is generally the one who gets the most targets by a small margin. So I do like him probably of those 3 options the best. Eric Rogers, sometimes he'll get a big target game and put you up the yardage, but I find a lot of time is very touchdown dependent, which is hard to bank on when you're paying that much money because that's a big 6-point swing. If you don't get that, and then you're probably not getting full value out of him. And Tavares Daniels, as I've talked about all season, big ups and big downs. Not really necessarily steady production any given week. He's had 3 weeks on the year where he put up less than 1 point per $1,000 for you. And then he's had a couple weeks where he's put up more than 2.5. So which Tavares Daniels are we going to get? Flip a coin, and that's about as easy as it is to determine. Flip a coin, and you never know what you're going to get out of Tavares Daniels. I do like Daniel Braverman, again, like I've said the past couple of weeks. Once he gets back in the lineup, if he gets involved in that offense, I like Braverman at a $26.42 salary, 10.5 point average on the year. Got involved in the offense, got involved in the return game, and had solid point totals, but he has been injured the past few weeks. Curley Gittins Jr., Dejon Brissett, Levi Noel, none of these guys get too heavily involved in the offense. The only one I would consider out of them is Gittins Jr. He has had 2 games this year where he put 10.8 and 14.8 points on the board, but he also in the other 4 games hasn't put up more than 5. So, and I believe those 2 games he had a touchdown. So if he's not getting a touchdown, he's not really getting very many targets to be worth putting in your lineup with some of the other good value plays available. Chandler Worthy is an interesting option to me, though. $37.12 is his salary, 9.3 points. Last week he had a big carry, I think 26 yards. He was the return guy for the Argos. He also got involved in the passing game a little bit. He comes in, he's not a starter at wide receiver. If he was, I would probably lock him in. If he's doing return job and starting at receiver, much like Braverman does, I would probably lock Chandler Worthy as a green light option. But I'm cautious on him just because if he does only return kicks, 9.3 is a little tough to hit. But if he can get a couple targets in there as well in the offense, that should be worth enough to get you your value. So I'm in the middle on Chandler Worthy. Getting into the final game of the week, the BC Lions and Saskatchewan Roughriders have a rematch from week 1 where Saskatchewan jumped out to a huge lead and then BC rallied back in the second half and made it close. Let's start off with the BC side of things. If there's one high-priced option you are going to definitely put in your lineup, I think it's got to be Lucky Whitehead. I've been waiting for him to fall back to earth, and he had week 3 and week 4, which were maybe more on the downside, but in the last 2 weeks, he's brought it back again with 22.7 and 25.4 points for the BC Lions, and his salary is rising higher and higher, $9,820. So you're gonna need that 24.6 from him to get what you need out of him to hit the full value. He's averaging 18.4. So with any of these high-priced options, it's really hard to get the full bang for your buck, but Whitehead's proven that he can be that guy. He's getting a good chunk of the targets. He's getting the long targets, which are going to be huge for hitting those totals. He gets involved in the missed field goal returns if those happen. I think if there's any high-priced option I like on a consistent basis, it is Lucky Whitehead right now, who, in my opinion, should be in the conversation as an MOP candidate through roughly the midway point of the season. Brian Burnham is more expensive and has had actually a worse season. A 14.7 point average for him. You need 26.2. Last week, he gave you just 6.2 out of his performance. So I expect a bounce back day, a good day for Burnham. I'm just not quite sure he hits over 26 to get you value this week. I could see him having an 18, 19 point, maybe he gets that 20 point mark. To get you close to that 2 points per thousand, but probably not, in my opinion, hitting 26.2. I'm staying away from Lamar Durant. He's been out the past few weeks. If he is in the lineup, I want to see how he gets back in there following the injury. 15.1 points when his average is 8.6. I need to see some consistency to be worth that price point for Lamar Durant. Shaq Johnson has been one of the cheaper plays for BC in the past few weeks. Ever since Durant and Dominic Rhymes have been out, his production has gone up a bit. He's now averaging 4.8 on the year. Last week was 6.7. The week before that, 9.8. So he's been hovering around the value for you. I wish he was a cheaper option at, say, a 3,000 or a 2,500. Then I'd probably green light him, assuming Durant's still out. But I do still semi-like Shaq Johnson. Just think you got to be cautious. He's not going to be a go-to receiver necessarily for BC. I picked Javon Coutoy last week, and, the last 2 weeks, really. 2 weeks ago, it worked well against Ottawa, 16.9. Last week, it did not, just 9.1. Not a bad day, but when you needed 15 points out of him, or something close to that, you were really hoping for a good performance from Javon Coutoy in the previous week. But he should be one of the go-to options. Riley likes looking towards him in the end zone. He's a big play guy. He's a big body that can, break tackles, pick you up yardage after the catch. His salary's gone up to over $5,000 now, but if you need those middle price points to fill your salary, I say take a chance on Javon Coutoy again this week. I think he's a good option, and I think he can have a big, big game for you. I also like Keon Hatcher. Perfect value play if he's starting. $2,500, 12.2 is his average. And it's not, one big game, one bad game. No, it's 11.5 and it's 12.8. So 2 good games in a row makes me put Keon Hatcher in the green light category. And our final team to look at here, the receivers for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Kyron Moore, much the same as, some of those higher priced options like Eric Rogers, like Brian Burnham I talk about, is I'm just not sold on. Yes, he's a great receiver. I have no doubt about that. I think he's one of the top receivers in the league. But I think his price is high and he doesn't hit that total for you. He hasn't hit 21 on the year once yet. His highest is 18.5 last week. Was a disappointment with just 5.6 against the Argos. BC has a pretty good defense. I'm cautious, and I'm actually just fully staying away from Kyron Moore's price this week. The two options I really like for the Riders, Braden Lenius, once again puts up the points you need, averaging 8.8. His salary has now jumped about $800 since the start of the season. 8.3 is what you're looking for. Last week he put up 10.1. So 4 out of 6 games this year, he's put up full value for you. He was also really close in another one with a 7.7 point day. So I like Braden Lenius' consistency here for the Riders, and until his price jumps past his consistency point, I see no reason not to put him in your lineup each and every week. But the breakout star for Saskatchewan, the breakout Canadian receiver in the league perhaps, has seen his value jump $700, and that's Keon Schaefer-Baker, who in now 4 games has averaged 13.2 points. In his past 2 alone, since he's been heavily featured for the Riders and has been actually pretty much their go-to target, 14.3 and 24.9, a big, I think, 99-yard day and a big touchdown for the Riders last week. He is having a breakout season in his past few games, and I think that continues this week against BC. It's still a relatively safe play at 32.49, and if he has another game like last week, you're taking that all the way to the bank. And then finally, looking at the other options here, Mitchell Picton, $2,500, yellow light on him. He hovers around getting you your value. He's had 6.6, 10.3, 5.8, 5.7, and then 2 games against the Bombers where he had 3.2 and 3.6. So he hasn't really broken out for a game this year. He's hovered close to the value, but hasn't hit it in recent weeks. So I think it's a pretty low-risk play to go on Mitchell Picton, but I don't think he is a green light because I don't think he's going to have the potential for a big game necessarily as Lenius or Schaefer-Baker could for you. Staying away from Jordan Williams-Lambert, he's missed a few games due to injury. If he is ready to go, I think 12.5 is maybe a tough mark for him to hit against BC's defense. He doesn't get a ton of targets any given week, and so that might be a tough total for Williams-Lambert to hit. And same thing with Ricardo Lewis. In his past in the 3 games he's played, he's averaging 2.9 points. Has just not put the value up and is not a go-to receiver for the Riders. So those are your options at receiver for each team in week number 8. Again, stay tuned for the depth chart updates coming out. I'll have one tomorrow for the Ticats and the Red Blacks. Once we have their depth charts, they may already be out by the time this video is released, but I did record it late Monday night before it was. And then for Friday's games, I'll have depth charts out probably on Thursday for you as well, just to prep you for everything for those. If you missed it, go back, check out the quarterbacks and the running backs. Those previews are out. Stay tuned later today for the defenses as well. And as always, do all the YouTube things, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you liked, what you didn't. If you have any fantasy questions, put them in the comments section or tweet them at me at CooperTrooper42. That starts with a K. Link to it's in the description. And if you want to play CFL Fantasy alongside myself and other viewers, go in the video description. There's a link there to the Canadian Football Fantasy Fix group over on the official CFL Fantasy site. And you can play alongside myself and others this week and every week throughout the 2021 season. That does it for your wide receiver preview. Stay tuned for the defenses. But in the meantime, as always, thanks for watching. Take care. Have a good one. Bye.